3 lifelong friends, 6 trusty balls, and endless NFL takes. Welcome to 3 Guys, 6 Balls NFL podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of 3 Guys, 6 Balls NFL podcast. My name is Joel Deering, and I'm here with my 2 co-hosts and childhood friends, Avery Grass and Will Olson. And today we have some exciting NFL topics we're talking about. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft. We're going to talk about some quarterbacks, talk about some receivers, and then towards the end of our show, we're going to talk about a team with the number 6 overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders, and what they've done so far in free agency and what they still need to do in the draft to be a competitive team this season. So let's hop right in. We're going to get started with our quarterbacks. And the topic we're discussing about the quarterbacks in this draft is who's going to have the best NFL career. So we've each picked a quarterback that we feel is going to be the best of the bunch, and we're going to debate which quarterback's going to have the best career and defend that quarterback and the reasons as to why. So let's get started with Avery. Who do you think is going to be the best quarterback in this draft?
I'm going to have to say Jalen Milroe. Part of that has to do with where he's ranked. I think he'll be a little lower. I think he'll be probably around second or third. I think first if any team has their head screwed on straight. I'm just kidding. But I think that he's going to end up doing the best. Mainly because I don't think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders really have what it takes. I think Shedeur is going to be, I think he's mainly driven by hype and, who his dad is. I think he has the wrong attitude going in. I think confidence is good, but I think some of this it's already a little bit of like jaded confidence. This is I don't know. It reminds me of Colin Kaepernick without the political divisiveness. Or it's just a little bit of, I'm entitled here. I'm going to make this happen. It's like, dude, as a guy that's never been in the league, like you're talking a big game. And I think that's going to end up being his undoing. I think he's just going to carry that with him and it's going to be detrimental to him. But I think Jalen Milroe, I've watched him for a while. I've watched all these guys for a while. I just think it's a feel test. Like I think he's just got it. I think also just where he's at in the draft, I think he's going to end up on a slightly better team. He's incredibly mobile. Comparing him to Shedeur Sanders, I think Shedeur is a little bit more of a improviser, but not a great one. I've watched a lot of his games live. So many balls. I mean, I remember thinking this, and then I went to his highlights just to see if I was just imagining this. So many deep balls are at least 15 yards short. Or you see the receivers having to come back and just jump for it. They all end up being receiver plays more than anything for the quarterback. Anytime I see a quarterback put the receiver in a position where he's compromised or is about to get hit or has to really jump and just basically compete with the defender for it, I'm like, that's not a quarterback highlight. That's a receiver highlight. I like seeing receivers just have an easy time, just catch it in stride, go. That to me is a mark of a better quarterback. It reminds me of someone who's just making some lucky plays, banking in a 3-point shot. Like that doesn't really count. Like it counts as points for the game, but if you're going in practice and you're going for consistency, a bank shot doesn't count. But yeah, I think Jalen Milroe.
Just so everybody knows, Avery lives in Alabama, so he's kind of obligated to say Jalen Milroe. However, I will say this. I did have him ranked as my number 2 guy. He was my number 2 guy on the list. If you'll let me, I have some stats here about Jalen Milroe. So not his passing stats because you don't want to know those because they're awful. But his rushing stats. So in 2023, he had 531 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. In 2024, he had 726 rushing yards and 20 rushing touchdowns on almost the same amount of attempts. I think it was like 7 more attempts that he had in 2024. So that alone is enough for an NFL team to look at and say, we can fix the passing. We can fix that, but this guy has it when it comes to rushing. If you're a team and you're wanting to duplicate what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing right now, he's the perfect quarterback to do that.
I will say one other thing. I think Will Howard is going to flame out. I don't think he's going to do well at all. But I think, and I don't want to hear anything about my own bias, I think Dylan Gabriel will have a solid career. I think a lot of those Oregon boys coming out of there, those quarterbacks, just have a good attitude. I mean, Mariota, I've got thoughts on that. I think he's kind of gotten screwed over on some of his, out of his control type of circumstances. And I think with Justin Herbert, he's great, but also Bo Nix, he's been solid, and I expect great things from him. I just think a lot of those quarterbacks coming out of Oregon are a lot more poised, a lot more mature, and have a lot more time under their belt, kind of going in with the right attitude, kind of the antithesis of Shedeur.
Will, since he mentioned Dylan Gabriel, Will, I'm interested to hear your opinion on this. There's been a lot of talk about his height and his build. Do you think that's going to be a factor for Dylan Gabriel in the NFL at all?
I mean, sure, right? There's no way it's not going to be when you're, 5'11", I think, and you're trying to throw over linemen who are 6'6". Granted, if you do the math, your yards back, you got your angle, your side angles there, you're doing all looking up. Like Drew Brees style, stretching the neck out. But Drew Brees won a Super Bowl, right? So there's nothing that says you can't win because you're short. It's more about skill and talent. So I think height is a factor, but I think it's a minor factor.
You also have guys like Baker Mayfield who are a little bit on the shorter side as well. I think Gabriel's a little bit shorter than him, but he's a good example of being successful in the NFL with a shorter build. So I could definitely see Dylan Gabriel being a solid, at least backup quarterback in the NFL. So let's go to Will. Will, who do you have as your quarterback?
Well, again, out of obligation, I'm going to pick Will Howard. His name is Will. My name is Will. I think that pretty much sums up my entire opinion. Thanks, guys. Joel, to you. No, but for real, bring height back into it. He's 6'4". He's 236. He measures on the high side of both of those for this year's draft quarterbacks. 40 time, 4.85. So he's not the slowest, not the fastest. I don't need him to. I'm not looking for a quarterback. And call me old school with this. I'm not looking for a quarterback to run that much. I want them to, dare I say, Danny Dimes-esque, run when they have to, but also I need them to stand there and throw the ball, and that's what Will Howard did. He stood there and he threw the ball. He had 1,000 passing yards just this last year on their way to win the national championship. So like, he's a proven winner. He fought adversity.
And they wrecked Oregon the second time around.
Yeah, the second time around.
The second time.
They wrecked him. And so 5-year starter, K-State for 4 years, didn't do that good at K-State. Didn't do that good at K-State. He came to Ohio State where the coaching's better, the facilities are better. It's just overall better. And he had an amazing season. 4,000 passing yards, 35 touchdowns. He did throw 10 interceptions, but that's not, dare I say, unreasonable. That's less than one a game. So as he moves into the NFL, the theory is that the coaching and the facilities and all that gets better. And so as a proven improver, he's just going to go ahead and continue to improve. And much like Avery said with Jalen Milroe, he's not Cam Ward. He's not Shedeur Sanders. He's not one of these guys that's being touted as the best in the draft. So he's not going to go 1-2. There's potential for him to go to a higher team. As you mentioned earlier, Jalen Hurts, who was a second-round quarterback. The Eagles got him in the second round. And so you don't, just because he's not one of the top guys, doesn't mean he can't go on to be the top guy. I think he's got the physical ability and talents, and then he's shown consistent improvement to where he's just going to have the best of all the NFL careers.
I want to jump in a little bit. I'm going to push back on that. Mainly because I feel like I have to respond. I just said I think Will Howard is going to be a bust when no one asked me.
You did say that.
I think, you're right. He hardly did anything at K-State. He goes to Ohio State. You've got the best roster money can buy. You've got insane wide receivers. You've got an insane team. You're playing the Big Ten on a weirdly off year where Oregon and Ohio State seem to be just the lone two powers. I mean, I guess Penn State's in there too, but like Michigan, even though they beat them, was a massive disappointment. I think that his support around him made him look a lot better. I watched a lot of Ohio State games, mainly because I was an Oregon fan. I watched them before they played Oregon. I watched them after they played Oregon. And I did not watch them play Oregon the last time because I was scared and I wasn't at home. And I recorded it thinking I would watch it when I got back. And then I saw the result after the first quarter. And I'm like, I'm not watching this game. And I'll admit that. But I think that he had enough support where any quarterback coming out of high school that was decent could have had a great year. It reminds me a little bit, although the result is different, of Joe Burrow. I think the difference is that Joe Burrow on his own became a star. Like, he proved to everyone why he was the Heisman favorite. I mean, no one ever... I mean, I guess what I'm saying is
that team was the most stacked team in all of college football history.
No, but the thing is, his stats and his play, if you look at his highlights, what he did, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Like, Will Howard, dude is just, I mean, again, you could have put a great quarterback from a high school team onto this team, and they probably would have won most of their games even then. What I'm saying is, like, his two receivers, I mean, his highlights are few and far between. I mean, there's some great plays, but it's not like he himself made great plays. It's the same as like a running back running right up the middle for a touchdown. You can say he ran hard and ran smart, but the truth of the matter is that O-line opened that up for him. All he had to do was run straight. Anybody with legs could have run straight. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten as far. Maybe they would have, collapsed on him. That's just speed. But I guess what I'm saying is I think Will Howard has made too many dumb mistakes. One being that Oregon game. That was the worst clock management I've ever seen. I don't even know what he was thinking. And I've seen a lot of other interceptions that were purely his fault. I'm still an advocate for quarterbacks when I say that the stats, there should be two types of interceptions. And it comes down to subjective call. But the ones that are the receiver's fault and the ones that are his fault. Because the ones that hit both the receivers' two hands and then it bounces up and someone catches it, I'm like, nah, that's the receiver's interception. But all of his were bad. Even at the combine, he looked terrible. He looked so bad. Anyway, a lot of this again is going on the field test, but I would love to review this episode in a few years and either eat my own words or I don't know, say I told you so. I don't know.
That LSU team, 2019 LSU team, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You cannot tell me that Joe Burrow is self-made when he had those three on his offense.
No, but the difference is
the best team money could buy allegedly back then. But still, that team was incredible.
But that's the difference, is that he still on his own with that stacked team made incredible plays. I mean I don't just mean he tossed the ball up and Odell came in one-handed catch it. So like that throw, I would say, even though that was the Odell throw that we all know about and love.
Offensive pass interference.
Even though there was pass interference, like that's something that I would say like that catch was Odell's catch. Less than, Eli's throw. It's like, the throw is where you just threw it down the field. But what I'm saying is Joe Burrow himself made incredible plays despite having that talent. Like there are plays where you're like, oh shit, he took the ball. Like he owned that rather than this guy who's just, I get sacked if I get too much pressure. Fortunately, my receivers are like top in the country. I can just throw it down and they'll come down with it. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think there's anything really spectacular about him other than the fact that he got a starting job on a stacked Ohio State team this year.
Well, that's what you're talking about. Joe Burrow is right now, right? He just throws the ball up to his receivers, and if not, he's getting sacked.
The big thing is we won't be able to tell.
Right,
we won't be able to tell for a while. But at least, Joe Burrow has vindicated himself in that, yes, he was right to be selected as high as he was. It's not one of those things where, oh man, he's kind of a bust. It's like, no, hey, you were on that team. You did pretty well. You did incredible, actually. You won a championship and you won the Heisman. But now let's see if you can still keep this going. The difference is I think any of these quarterbacks on Ohio State, any of them in the draft, would have won a national championship. 35-10 is fine. But when you got these all-star receivers on your team, I just think it's like, yeah, that's the bare minimum. If you play with that high of a team, like you are expected to be a Heisman contender. You are expected to be, top in the nation, period, regardless of, how good you are because of who we are and the team we have around us. But all in all, I just think he's just gonna suck so bad.
Here's the route I think is gonna be best for Will Howard. And also probably Jalen Milroe. So I see Milroe going in probably the second round of the draft. Maybe the end of the first, maybe. But probably the second round. And then Will Howard's probably around fourth or fifth round. So I think probably the best position for both of these guys is to go to a team who has a veteran quarterback. For Will Howard, I think probably a good team would be the Rams with Matthew Stafford there, where he can sit for a few years, he can learn, and then step into the starting role. I think that's going to be the case with Jalen Milroe. I don't know if he is going to have that luxury of being able to sit behind a veteran quarterback. I think he's probably going to be forced into the starting role sooner rather than later. But with Will Howard, he's probably going to be a guy where he sits for a few years and then comes in and we can really see what he can do. Yeah,
I think Milroe is going to be a lottery pick. I know it's a basketball term. I just mean like top half of the draft. Top 14, whatever. I think that teams are, as they do every year, they're all kind of feigning like, yeah, we're looking at an offensive lineman, we're looking at a cornerback, and then they're like, a quarterback's still available? Let's just get him. It's just that eye candy. It's like you want it's the treats at the checkout aisle. It's like, I've earned it, you know. That's what they'll do. I think he'll go top half of the first round somehow.
I could see a team trading back up into the end of the first round, kind of like the Ravens did for Lamar Jackson. That's probably where I see Jalen Milroe going, either there in the end of the first or in the early second. But let's get to my quarterback, and it's not Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, so that's interesting that none of us picked them. So my quarterback is Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss.
Cool. He was my number 2.
I think he's going to have a great NFL career, and I think he is going to be the Patrick Mahomes of this draft. He's not going to be Patrick Mahomes because nobody is Patrick Mahomes except for Patrick Mahomes. But what I mean by that is in 2017, when Patrick Mahomes was drafted, can you remember any of the quarterbacks that were drafted the same year? There's a couple in there I bet you probably have no idea who they are.
Are you talking about before Mahomes or just in the draft in general?
Who was projected to go before Mahomes? Projected.
What year was this?
Is that the Trubisky draft?
2017. That is the Trubisky draft.
So Mitch Trubisky, man, he went number 2, didn't he?
Yeah. 2 overall.
How many quarterbacks went before him?
There was only one quarterback before Mahomes, which was Trubisky.
Oh, okay.
So the quarterbacks who were projected and ranked above Patrick Mahomes in the draft was Mitch Trubisky. There's Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Kaiser, and some people even had Davis Webb out of Cal before Patrick Mahomes. So what I mean by Jaxson Dart being the Patrick Mahomes of this draft is nobody thinks he's going to be the first quarterback. Nobody thinks he's going to have the best NFL career. But I think when it's all said and done, this guy is going to get drafted in the top half of the draft. Somebody's going to trade up to get him, or they're just going to sit there and make a surprise pick and pick him. And then he's going to go into the NFL and he's going to be an efficient quarterback who completes a lot of passes, throws a lot of touchdowns, and he is going to have the best NFL career of all these guys. So let me just read some stats from Jaxson Dart here. This last year in college football, he was the most efficient quarterback in college football with a rating of 180.69. He led the FBS with 10.8 yards per attempt, and he had a total of 4,774 total yards on offense. So when you look at his stats, his passing touchdowns don't jump off the page because he only had 29. But when you look at the passing attempts, he did more with less. So what I mean by that is you look at guys like Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, they had 450, almost 500 passing attempts. Jaxson Dart had less than 400 attempts, and he completed 69.3% of his passes. He also improved every single year in college, and he improved his numbers in completion percentage, passing yards, yards per attempt, touchdown passes, and quarterback rating. So you see with this guy, he's somebody who can consistently improve his game. And then when you consider his rushing yards, he looks even more efficient because this last season he had 495 rushing yards, which was second on his team. He averaged 4 yards a carry. And then in 2023, he had 391 rushing yards. In 2022, he had 614 rushing yards. What this kind of tells me is here's a guy who is efficient when he throws the ball. He can throw the ball to wherever he wants on the field. He can make all the throws. And if he needs to, it's not going to be his first instinct to run. But if he needs to, he's going to be like Patrick Mahomes in the sense where if something breaks down, he can extend the play. And if he needs to, he's going to go and run the ball, get those extra yards, and pick up a first down. And then another thing I loved about Jaxson Dart is when you look at the receiving stats for Ole Miss, he had 5 players with over 400 receiving yards and another player who had 394 receiving yards. And each of those players had at least 2 touchdowns. So that tells me that not only can he make all the throws, but he knows how to go through his progressions. And so he's not just looking at the first guy on every play and he wants to throw it to that first guy. If the first guy's not open, he's looking for the next guy. And if he's not open, he's looking for the next guy. And then if that breaks down, he's running the ball. So I think Jaxson Dart's going to be a fantastic quarterback in the NFL. And I think a team, I mean, he could even go as high as number 3 to the Giants, in my opinion. I think that would be a great fit for him. He could potentially go to the Raiders at 6, the Saints at 9, Seattle at 18 if he does fall, maybe even the Steelers at 21. And depending on who they have as their quarterback, I know, let's take Seattle, for example. They just signed Sam Darnold. If they don't want to start him right away, they could sit him for a year or two and then let him take over the starting role. I think that would be a perfect opportunity for Jaxson Dart.
So Jaxson Dart is the Patrick Mahomes of this class, and Will Howard is the Jackson Mahomes of this class.
No one should be the Jackson Mahomes.
That's,
I mean, you got a lot of good stuff there. I had Jaxson Dart at number 2 just because he's going to get drafted higher and go to a worse team. I mean, that's just what it is. He's gonna get too much oomph. He's gonna get drafted to somebody terrible, and he's gonna get the Marcus Mariota treatment, where he's gonna have 5 different offensive coordinators in 4 years, or 5 and 6 years, whatever it was. No consistency, and he's just gonna be left hanging to dry, or whatever the phrase is. You know what I mean? He's just not gonna have the same opportunity as one of these guys that goes a bit later, like say Jalen Milroe. Or Will Howard, specifically Will Howard.
Let me ask you this, though. Were the Bengals good before they got Joe Burrow?
No, but on the flip side, the Colts weren't good before they got Andrew Luck, right? They had a good team for 1 year, and then Peyton Manning broke his neck, and then they got Andrew Luck. So, and then the Bengals have consistently, Joe Burrow, honestly, has consistently lifted that team up. That team has not done enough to help him out, offensive line-wise specifically. And now they can't, right? Because you get quarterback handcuffs, because these contracts are so large, you can't do anything. And so he's got to go to a team that has the room and is actually dedicated to winning, not these consistently bad players or bad teams that don't seem to care. Obviously, they all care. They all want to win. It's professional sports. They all want to be the best. But when you're perpetually at the bottom end of the top end of the draft order, you know what I mean? It's clear you just have a not give a shit attitude towards winning. I mean, look at the Jaguars, right? They are consistently in the top 15. Now, there's a couple years where they pop out of it, but they're consistently bad. And they just either can't figure it out or don't want to. And there's just no turning it around. They got Trevor Lawrence and oh yeah, this is our guy. Maybe not, because we didn't do enough to support him. That's the only real problem with these players going early, is that the teams don't have enough oomph to support them because they can't get free agents in, because nobody wants to play for the Browns. Nobody wants to play for, even the Giants. They're just not, even the big market ones aren't big sellers, because veteran free agents are ring hunting nowadays. They're not just contract hunting, they're ring hunting. And they're not going to play with Tom Brady right now because he's out. Kind of. And so the ring hunting is going on in Kansas City, and they don't need a quarterback currently. So I just think it's a different dynamic.
I see what you're saying with these quarterbacks. A lot of them do end up not being successful because their team around them is not successful. But I think there's a lot of good examples where you do have a quarterback who's drafted high and they do become successful. I don't necessarily think that 100% means that he's not going to be successful just because he's drafted higher. And the thing with Jaxson Dart too is he may not even go that high. That's just my personal opinion. He may go to a team later in the draft. It's very possible. He may not even go in the first round. There's a lot of mixed opinions on him. So it really just depends on what these NFL teams think. But like Avery mentioned, I think what we should do is watch this back in 3 or 4 years and see how things play out. So let's go over to our next segment. We're going to talk about some of these wide receivers in the draft. Specifically, I want to talk about the top wide receiver, not Travis Hunter, because I'm not counting him as a receiver and counting him as a corner. We're going to talk about Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. And I want to see your guys' opinion on him first before I say my opinion. And also, if you guys do have any other receivers that you like in this draft, talk a little bit about them as well and just tell me the reason why you think those receivers can be successful in the NFL.
I mean, McMillan, I think he's got great size. And honestly, just a lot of the physical attributes I think are there. I didn't watch him much when he was playing, but I mean, I think he's one of those solid picks where I'm like, I watched his stuff and like, I can't find anything where like to pick apart. He genuinely looks like a solid option. I mean, I like Matthew Golden because he's incredibly fast and he had some great highlights. Honestly, I mean, Tez Johnson's someone that I think will surprise a lot of people, even though he's probably the smallest receiver in the class. But the one guy that I'm surprised, and I'd have to do more information, to do more research to find out why he's not ranked a little higher, because every time I watch this kid play, he is destroying. And it's Io Manor from Stanford. That kid, every time I've seen him play, I mean, he is getting like 250 yards and like 2 or 3 touchdowns. And it's something that when you watch it, it's not like, oh, the quarterback threw a great pass. It's like, no, this guy is different. Like, he separates himself from these defenders. And it's something that I'm really curious. Like, I'm going to watch this guy's career closely because I think he's going to be one of those guys that, like, really pops off. But I don't know. Maybe if you're ranked 12th that I've seen in most of these around that area, like 10 to 15, maybe there's a better reason. I think most of the other guys ranked ahead of him are just in bigger programs or just had a little bit more hype around him. I think he would be better than Tez Johnson. I mean, and I'm an Oregon homer. But yeah, that's the thing. A lot of these receivers, to me, I see a lot of these receivers as kind of like quarterbacks where they're kind of victims of their circumstances, where, I mean, I bring it back to Tyreek Hill a lot. I mean, him in Miami this past season, it's like, yeah, I mean, it takes two to tango. If you don't have someone throwing them the ball, they're not going to look that great. So a lot of it comes down to their situation and also how they're utilized. But I think McMillan, I think he's going to be solid. I think he's fairly placed at the top position.
So I want to ask you this about McMillan,
I can agree
Avery.
with all of that, Avery.
I want to ask, so Will, since you said you agree, I want to ask you this. So if McMillan is the top receiver in the draft, his NFL player comp is Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. So for me personally, if I'm a team that needs a receiver and you tell me that in the top 10 of the draft I'm getting Drake London, I'm like, I'm out. I'm not interested. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's a fair comparison for McMillan, or do you think he's going to be better?
Are they when they're doing that comparison, they're not saying what we think his ceiling is as far as player career. We're talking about like physical attributes. Like, this is kind of the same general player. I mean, as an example, Jalen Milroe's comparison was Michael Vick. I mean, like, what are we saying here? That he's a fast quarterback? Because that would make sense. But like, where do those comparisons stop? If you just have to, instead of describing the player, you got to point to another guy that's similar to him. It's like I have to say, what does Joel look like? And I just have to find another face to point at to explain to him what Joel looks like. I guess whenever I see those, I've been so confused. I mean, on one hand, it puts eyeballs on your articles, but on the other hand, I'm like, what does that tell me? Are you telling me that this is how good you think the player is going to be? Is this just kind of what he resembles, like what he looks like, like kind of a body archetype?
I think it's a combination of kind of his size definitely plays a factor because Drake London is a bigger receiver, but I think it's kind of like their play style, and they're just comparing the play style of the player, I think. So, I mean, if you look at Patrick Mahomes, I looked up his draft profile, and I know he's a quarterback, not a receiver, but just for the comparison of player comps here, Patrick Mahomes' player comp was Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler was terrible. So, I mean, that tells you right there, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Was Jay Cutler even a runner? I mean, I'm sure he scrambled out of necessity, but like, I remember him having kind of a Peyton Manning build. Or maybe, am I just wrong?
No,
I mean, I know it's been
right.
a while.
I wouldn't necessarily call Mahomes a runner either. More of like a waddler down the field, but
yeah,
that's fine.
That's what he does.
Looking at the comparisons for all these top guys in the wide receivers, you're not wrong, right? So McMillan's got Drake London, Matthew Golden, he's got Jalen Waddle. Then we've got Luther Burden has Kadarius Toney. I also see Chris Olave here. MK wide receiver.
MK Egbuka.
Ohio State. Egbuka, thank you. I'm going to butcher every single name. Well, not all of them.
That's why I just said McMillan.
You are smart. But hey, one more time, Joel. Egbuka?
Emeka Egbuka.
There it is. Emeka Egbuka. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Don't go for
the show. We get Kadarius Toney again. And so I think these player comparisons are poo-poo caca, as they say. I put almost no stock in them.
No. It's Emeka Egbuka.
I put almost no stock in them. I don't know. Avery hit it right on the head, though. With size, with stats, I mean, he's up there. He's got to be the guy. The only thing that gives me any real reserve is that he played in the Big 12, which is definitely known for its defense, right? Like, that is a full defensive conference. And so I just worry about when he gets in the NFL when people are actually playing defense, about how it's going to go. I mean, he had 1,300 yards last year. He had 1,400 yards the year before that. So the guy can catch and probably run. But I just worry about where he came from and the defensive skill ability that he's going to see at the next level, especially going early for a receiver and then having high expectations. I mean, look at Marvin Harrison Jr., right? He went early. He had incredible expectations, and then it just didn't pan out. And not that it won't pan out, but as Avery said again, it comes back to who's throwing the ball. I don't know where McMillan is projected to go currently, but I don't imagine it's going to be to a team that has a skilled thrower.
Probably top 15. So here's my opinion.
I mean, what's your best option there?
Panthers. Best option. Yeah. Panthers.
Well, I'm looking at this one right here, and that's where he's projected to go. Is at Carolina.
Yeah, at 8. And it makes sense because the Panthers do need a receiver. So here's my opinion on McMillan and the whole wide receiver class as a whole. So I personally am not very high on this class. I don't think there's a lot of guys who are going to be that guy for a team. And I'm not very high on McMillan. And here's the reason why. So he was very, very inconsistent with his play. Not only this year, but last year as well. Last year was a little bit more consistent, but this last season especially was very, very inconsistent for McMillan. So I actually watched Arizona's first game just by chance against New Mexico. And I saw this guy, he had 10 catches, 304 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And I was like, dude, this guy is going to win the Heisman. And this was the first game of the season. And so I was interested. So the next game I watched, next game, he has 2 catches for 11 yards. And I was like, dude, what happened? So then I'm still interested, though. I just want to see how he...
one-trick pony.
Yeah, I'm still interested. I want to see how he rebounds. And by the way, the 2 catches for 11 yards was in a 22-10 win. So it's not like he was in a blowout win and he just didn't play. They only won by 12. So the next game versus Kansas State, 11 catches for 138 yards. So I'm like, okay, we're back. Like, he recovered from his bad game. Then the game following that, 6 catches for 50 yards in a 23-10 win. So they only won by 13, not a blowout. So he was still playing pretty much the whole game. So here's more inconsistencies. He had 8 touchdowns on the season, but 4 of those came in the first game of the season. Then he went 6 straight games without a touchdown. So I love his size. Absolutely love his size. It's fantastic. But he's kind of a boom or bust guy in any game. You never know what you're going to get from him. It kind of reminds me of like Julio Jones a little bit, which is kind of a good and a bad thing. So, especially from a fantasy perspective, like you have Julio Jones, who was a dominant receiver, but he can never find the end zone. And especially for a guy like McMillan, who's 6'5", like I just feel like he should have been more consistent, especially in the end zone with touchdowns. Again, he had 4 touchdowns in the first game, and then he went 6 straight games without a touchdown. I mean, there's just a lot of guys in this draft that I just don't think that they're going to be, I mean, they might be able to help a team, but I don't think they're going to be that guy. Speaking of teams who need a receiver, though, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders a little bit. So let me just read through my notes here and talk about some of the moves that they've made so far this season. Starting with their coach, they have Pete Carroll, and then they traded for Geno Smith. They signed guard Alex Kappa. They signed Max Crosby to an extension. They signed safety Jeremy Chin, signed linebacker Landon Roberts. Then they re-signed a couple of their own guys, defensive linemen Malcolm Kuntz and Adam Butler. They recently released their starting center, Andre James. And then they've lost 4 defensive starters in free agency. So they've lost Trevon Moehrig and Robert Spillane, Nate Hobbs, and Divine Diablo. So they've signed some guys. They've also lost some guys. There's still a lot of work that this team needs to do. I think the Geno Smith trade put them in a better position, especially at the quarterback position, than they were last season. But they still have a lot of work to do. And so I'm curious as to what you guys think the Las Vegas Raiders still need to do when it comes to the draft.
First off, we've seen this whole Geno Smith thing before, right? Without the right team, Geno Smith is mid to bottom tier. So Geno Smith going to the Raiders, that moves the needle probably backwards. Not even none. It moves it backwards for me. They need more offensive help, and they gotta get Max Crosby some help. Because when you really got one guy on that line, he's gonna get double teamed, triple teamed every time, and just hope for the best. Looking at this mock draft, the first 3 rounds, they have them going offense. And I know they have a bunch of picks coming up this draft, but they're going to need some definite help. Brock Bowers can't be the only person on your team catching the ball. You got to have a more than one tiered offense. They haven't had a good running game since Josh Jacobs. They haven't had a good quarterback since they weren't in Las Vegas. They need a lot of help. I don't like trading up. And we just talked about quarterbacks. I don't like trading up for one of these guys. I don't think it's worth it. sitting back waiting, maybe get Jaxson Dart or Will Howard later on. Although Will Howard is not, he's not a Raider.
Good.
He's not a Raider. Now, Raiders have a profile of who they pick. Even their punters are fast.
Are you saying he's a pussy and that's why the Raiders don't want him?
No, they draft speed first. That is what's just been the historical fact for probably generations now.
He's saying that he's slow.
Henry
Yeah.
Ruggs.
Yeah.
Henry Ruggs.
Well, that's the fastest of them all. So, looking at this mock draft here, they've got him going Ashton Genty with pick 6, Jaxson Dart with pick 37, and then Jack Beck, I guess, is how you say that guy's name. I don't know. At TCU with 68.
Receiver, right?
Yeah, receiver. I don't hate any of that. Actually, I kind of like it. Bringing some fresh legs for the team. You get Jaxson Dart in there working with quarterback coach Greg Olson. Not that Greg Olson. But he's new, right? It's a new coach. Yeah, Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator now. You have a new head coach. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have a new quarterbacks coach. They pretty much fired the entire coaching staff, brought in a whole new regime. Mark Davis still is going to have the same haircut, so no worries there. And so they have potential. They just have to continue to make the right moves. And if you're going to keep Geno Smith on your team, you have got to get an offensive line to support him. That guy's getting up there in age, and he is not the most mobile anymore.
I'm going to say something that y'all aren't going to like. I think the Raiders take Jalen Milroe with their first-round pick.
Jalen.
I think. What did I say? Jalen? I'll
Jaden
just call him-
McDaniels.
I'll just
Jaden
call him
McDaniels.
J Mill. I think he's going, what is it? What do they got? Pick 7?
Pick
Something like
6.
that? 6? Yeah, he's going 6. That's what I think. Although, yeah, no, I think he'll be him. I was thinking it could be some other quarterback, but I think the other two quarterbacks, Cam Ward and Sanders, will be taken before pick 6.
Definitely.
But besides that, I mean, they've got so many holes, so many things that need addressing. But even though they picked up Geno, clearly as history has shown, that doesn't mean that they won't also draft a quarterback. But yeah, I think Jalen Milroe, Jaden will help their team.
So, Will, going back to that mock draft that you pulled up, I actually love that for the Raiders. I think Ashton Genty going at 6, their run game was the worst in the NFL. They had 79.8 yards per game. The next worst team had 91.8 yards per game.
Jeez.
They were the worst rushing team in the NFL. So drafting Genty at 6 would be an absolute win for the Raiders. Then getting Jaxson Dart, my quarterback, in the second round, I think that would be an absolute steal. Let him sit behind Geno for a couple years and then put him in the starting role. That would be a win. And then getting a receiver, they have to get another receiver to help out Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. There's a stat here. Their third down percentage was the third worst in the league, 34.8%. Primarily, that's because everybody knows they're trying to go to Brock Bowers. And so you have to get some other help aside from Jacoby Myers on the outside. Now, is the guy projected to go to them in the third round going to be a star? Probably not, but they need some sort of help. They do need a lot of help on defense, but I absolutely love that mock draft that you pulled up.
Look at their coach. Look at their ownership, right? So you've got Brady in there now. He's got his fingers in the pie, and you've got Pete Carroll. Carroll's a run-first coach. He always has been, except in the Super Bowl on the 1-yard line. But that one's different. He's always been a run-first coach, and so he's going to need to build that running game first and foremost. And so he's a West Coast style, wants to play action, wants to establish his ground game, and get to the tight end, where they already have a tight end. And so they need the running back, and they've got a coach, or they've got a quarterback that can throw the ball medium accuracy, short accuracy, pretty good. That is what Pete Carroll's going to thrive on. And Brady, of all people, to come in and to have that resource at whatever capacity available to you, it's just going to be invaluable.
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at a lot of teams with their running game, it keeps the other offense off the field. So especially when you're in a division where you play the Chiefs twice, you play Justin Herbert twice, you're playing Bo Nix twice. So you have to keep them off the field. You can't do that with 79.8 yards a game. If you get Genty in there and you run the ball, I know they still need help on the offensive line. They did address it somewhat, but they still do need some help. But Ashton Genty is going to solve a lot of those problems for you.
For a couple of years.
Yes.
I think Genty should go to the Cowboys.
Shut up.
Will loves that one.
It's not worth it. It's not.
Sorry, I'm just trolling. Maybe.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna let it pass. I'm gonna rise above.
Let me just say one last thing here about the Raiders and them addressing their running game. before we end our show because we're out of time. So if you get Ashton Genty, it's going to solve a lot of your problems on offense, but also on defense. I mean, this defense was on the field a lot because their offense was so bad with their quarterback play, which they've taken care of, their running back play, they couldn't get first downs. So if you take care of that problem at quarterback and running back, and then in the draft, you can still get some guys. You still have time in free agency to sign some linemen. Take care of that problem on offense. It helps you significantly on defense. So I think that's the right way to go for the Raiders if Genty is there at 6. And I think that's gonna help them a lot. If they do that, then they can compete in this division. I'm actually kind of excited for the Raiders right now because I think they have a really good opportunity to build this team into a winning team, especially after coming off a 4-13 season. You need to put that excitement back in your franchise. And I think if you get Ashton Genty, it's going to do that for the Raiders.
It just sucks incredibly that they are in the AFC West. And they have 2 absolute buzzsaws and the Broncos who are up and coming to every single year.
You have these tough teams, and they got to deal with the Broncos.
I mean, how else was I supposed to say that, right?
Hey, they made the playoffs.
Up and coming. They're up and coming. They're fine enough for now. But again, they have the same problem the Raiders do. They have 2 absolute buzzsaws to play 2 times each every single year.
Yep. Well, I think the Raiders have a really good opportunity to build this team. And so we'll see what they do in the NFL draft and with the remainder of free agency and through the offseason. Hopefully they make the right decisions for their franchise. I really do hope it works out. I think their fans have been wanting to have a good team for a while, and it just hasn't worked out. So I think they are in a really good spot to do that. I honestly hope that when we come back to them after the draft is over, that we're saying that they're one of the winners of the draft. I honestly do, because I think they have a really great opportunity to do that. So that's all we have time for on our show today. Thank you for tuning in to 3 Guys, 6 Balls. Stay tuned for more next week. We're going to talk more NFL drafts. We're going to talk about free agency and some of the winners and losers of free agency after a full week. Thank you for tuning in again. Don't forget throughout this week to keep your balls played with, and we will see you next time.